Welcome, I'm your host Christina Haskin, and tonight I'm delighted to have a wonderful artist and author, Sathya Ramavataram, and she's joined us tonight to talk about her first book. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to tell you a little bit about Sathya's background. Sathya is an ardent devotee of Sai Baba and the author of her first book, Mandalamanjari. This beautiful book is a tribute to her guru and an appreciation for all that he has taught her on her spiritual journey. Her life's vocation has been as a nuclear physicist. She's obtained her PhD from Manchester University, and she's pursued research in other facilities in the US and Canada. Now retired, she has turned her interest to the spiritual wisdom of the Vedic literature. Her deep understanding of Vedic texts, combined with her fine talent and painting, she has captured the essence of the scriptures in her paintings called Mandalas. Her book is a series of wonderful mandala paintings accompanied by spiritual meanings behind each mandala's creation. So Sathya, tell us a little bit how this wonderful book came about.
This book is a result as a culmination of many years of study of Vedic literature, and I was inspired to study those by the grace of my teacher, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, whom I met a few years ago in India. The first time I met him, I had a kind of life-transforming experience, and that led to that was a big step in my spiritual growth. And the theme of the book is, he has always said that there are 4 questions that we should ask, each individual should ask. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? How will I get there? He said, no matter what you are doing in your life, eventually at some point you will have to ask these questions to reach the spiritual goal of which is the purpose of life. That's the purpose of human life.
And in your journey, spiritual journey, and learning this wisdom from him, did you ask those questions of yourself?
I have never had a face-to-face conversation with him. The inspiration and the knowledge came through dreams and some daily experiences which intuitively I understood as a message from him, and that is how I progressed on understanding the answer to these 4 questions.
And as far as your artwork, you're a very talented artist, and how did you start painting the mandalas, and can you describe what a mandala
that
is?
That also came about in a very sudden and inspiring way by his grace. I came across a mandala called Sri Yantra, and this was developed, the article that I saw about it was an experiment by Deepak Chopra and his collaborators.
Oh, wow.
And what they did was conducted an experiment to find out why the sound Om has such a meditative effect and a very soothing and calming effect on the human mind. And what they did was to chant Om and convert these sound vibrations into a like we do for a cardiogram or any other thing. They put these sounds through an instrument called the sonoscope, and they came up with a geometric design which resulted due to the sound vibrations produced by Om. And this geometric design I saw in an article, and it drew my attention, and I wanted to do an artwork based on that. That's how I started out.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And at that time I did not know that this geometric design is called the Sri Yantra, and it is the yantra of creation. and that it is one of the basic mandalas in the Hindu scripture, spiritual art. So that's how I came about doing mandalas.
When you create a mandala, some of say the tree of life, how do you come up with the design and what inspires you in the scriptures that?
The way it happened was I would read a scriptural text, and whatever seemed to me the basic essence of that text, I felt that I should do a mandala based on that basic idea behind that text.
So you come from an intuitive,
yes, it's mostly His grace, because I just was like an instrument. And how I'm going to do the design, what colors I'm going to use, all that happened step by step without even my having a pre-planned idea. This is what I'm going to do.
Well,
so it's more like a meditation process through which I produce those mandalas.
In your book, you explained that there's many beautiful photographs of your paintings in the book, and each page you describe the spiritual meaning behind the piece, and that's a wonderful thing for people to get introduced to. How was that doing that writing?
The texts that I read and the mandalas that I did were almost like puzzles, pieces of a puzzle. There was no continuity in the way I did that. And then when I used to do this work at the senior center in Stamford, and there were other people who would be doing artwork in the same room along with me, and they kept asking me what the meaning of it was, and what am I doing, why am I doing this, and so on. And they were the ones who really encouraged me that this should be put into a book, because they said each one has such deep meaning, it would be useful to have this as a book. So that's when I started seriously thinking about how am I going to put this puzzle into place. And then I realized that all these drawings that I had done are actually really, they answer this question, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? And how do I get there?
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the pieces that you've done and give an example of the meaning of them? And we'll,
yes. The first thing that one must realize, according to the Hindu way of thinking about spirituality, is to realize the omnipresence of the divine. And one of the mandalas I did based on that concept was the one about the hibiscus flower. One day I got up in the morning and I looked at the daily calendar that I had bought, which has a quotation from one of his sayings, and in that it said that one should feel the presence of the divine in everything that is blooming, everything is that is growing, and everything that is dying. And then I went to open the curtains in the room, and there was a hibiscus plant next to the curtain. Beautiful flower fell down from the plant, and I took it and put it at the altar. And through the day, this flower went through those processes.
Just like people go through that cycle in
yes.
life. I always thought
it
that
was full
flowers.
in full bloom, then it slowly started withering and dying.
But beautiful.
But the beauty of it remained throughout the process. And so that is when you see the divine presence in everything around you. So that was one of the drawings I did based on that.
So someone reading the book, I could see where you see a beautiful paintings and you say that's a nice design, but once you read the spiritual text, it's much more a thing that you meditate on and say, oh gosh, I can sense
any
that.
Incident in life seems to have a spiritual meaning once you understand these ideas. And then the next step was that in Hinduism, they believe that there are three paths to realize this divine. There is the path of service, that's path of action, and there is the path of worship, devotion. Then there is the path of knowledge. In any of the, one can follow any of these paths based on one's own inner tendencies, and still realize the divine. So, for example, there was one beautiful text where I read about this path of service, selfless service, and how that can lead you to the divine. And it was so beautifully explained there giving the metaphor of the bees.
Oh, yes, I love that
And they
one.
call it the doctrine of honey. And it describes how the bee collects the juice from the plants, from the flowers, and converts it into honey in its stomach. Then it deposits it in a hive, the honey. But it has no more interest in that honey. It has just instinctively done this. And this honey is going to be used by whoever comes across the hive and they benefit from it. So in the same way, if we do a selfless act, then that produces a positive force in the universe, and that this text describes is stored in the sun, and it is returned back to the universe.
Oh, how nice.
When and where it is required.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily come back to the person who performed the selfless act.
What a nice image to think about when you're sitting in the sun.
So with this whole selfless action can only come if you have that pure love for everything around you, and that is the quality of the divine. So that is the path of action. And in the path of worship, you have many ways you can do that. And one of the texts describes how it is important to remember the names of the Lord, to repeat the name of the Lord. In each spiritual tradition we have that. And in this text it describes how a seeker goes to a spiritual teacher and says, how do I realize the self, the divine in me? So he says, it's not that simple as I can give it in a one sentence answer.
Process, yeah.
But he says you have to begin somewhere, and the way to begin is to repeat the name of the Lord. And he gives him a series of names, and one of them is the name of Shiva as the one with the blue throat. And there is a whole mythological story about how he got the blue throat. He got it because when they were churning the Milky Ocean, the first thing that came out was a poison, dreadful poison. And nobody wanted to go anywhere near it because it was such a potent poison. But Shiva, to save the universe, swallowed it. He said, I'll swallow it. And so that's how he got the blue throat.
Oh, and he sacrificed.
Because he had swallowed the poison. And so that's an act of total sacrifice that he decided to do.